Welcome to the Healthcare Radius podcast. Today we have with us KG Anandakrishnan, who is the Director General, Organization of Pharmaceutical Producers of India, OPPI, which represents research-based pharmaceutical companies in India. Recognized in the pharmaceutical industry for its rich and diverse experience, KG continues to mentor healthcare startups and is on the advisory board panel of several institutions, along with being a board member of other organizations. Welcome, Mr. Anandakrishnan, and thank you for
Thank
joining us at the podcast. So
thank you very much.
the first question is, India is known as the hub of healthcare services, and the pandemic has given a boost to the Indian pharma and the healthcare sector. Where do you see the Indian pharma and the healthcare in the coming year?
See, you are right. When you say that the pandemic has given a boost to the healthcare industry, in general. I think all the learning that we have acquired during this pandemic phase is something that we must really leverage and further strengthen the entire healthcare ecosystem. Let me just give a couple of examples. See, this pandemic opened up new avenues like the telemedicine, the much more aggressive e-pharmacies, etc. And all of these have helped actually penetrate into much deeper geographies, tier 2, tier 3 cities, etc. And this advantage, that we have now must be further leveraged, and we must ensure that we are able to provide much more equitable access to healthcare across the length and breadth of the country. The this pandemic also, helped actually in terms of boosting innovation. You have seen so many new innovations that happened during this particular phase. It expanded healthcare infrastructure, digital, health innovation zoomed. The need for a strong R&D pipeline became even more acute, and also, the healthcare financing also emerged in some new avatars. And this is where I see that there is a huge opportunity to leverage all these, what should I call it, as learning that we have, and how do we take it to the next level. So I'll give you one more example is, during the pandemic, the type of collaboration that happened between the stakeholders, whether it is the industry, the government, the NGOs, the patient bodies, across the stakeholders, collaboration was at its best. And that is what also enabled availability of medical services as well as availability of medicines, right through the pandemic, despite the fact that we had complete lockdown. I'm sure none of you really witnessed any issue of availability of drugs. Everything was available, and that learning is the power of collaboration. If we collaborate, we can really achieve far greater things. And I hopefully that this learning will be continued, and it should not be just only for the pandemic phase. Look at the other, part in terms of digitization. The huge amount of changes have happened in terms of digitization during the pandemic. And while pre-pandemic, it had already begun, but what we have seen is that during the pandemic, it took off, to a very different tangent. And I think this will help in doctors to run their practice better. It will help them to streamline small and large healthcare networks. And it will also help in terms of, with the help of data analytics, help deliver better quality healthcare, and also in terms of better human resource management. So there are several aspects that this particular issue has in a way benefited us. Uh, you also take a look at it. I was just reflecting upon it. The confidence that one had literally for telemedicine prior to the pandemic. Telemedicine was there. It was being practiced in small, manner here and there. But the confidence was not there in telemedicine per se, because we always wanted to meet the doctor, have that one-to-one conversation, etc. But now, post this, telemedicine has gone to a very different place, and the comfort level has improved. And this, I think, will help, in terms of getting treatment even at the remotest corner of the country in the best possible manner. And all this that I've talked to you about, just remember that we have to keep the patient at the center, because he or she is the person whom we are servicing, and ensure that everything that we are developing, whether it is digital analytics, whether it is diagnostic tools, whether it is telemedicine, whether it is e-pharmacy, whether it is the counseling mechanism, everything must be centered around the patient, so that there can be a much better health outcomes, for the patient. That is exactly what I believe that this new era will bring in. That's my view on this question that you asked me.
So you spoke about telemedicine. So we can assume that this is going to be a very major trend coming forward. So when we did a survey prior to the pandemic, what was visible was, we thought mostly the younger generation will be much more, will take telemedicine much more easier than the older generation. But during the post the pandemic, what we found was most the people who actually took on to telemedicine is someone who is above 50 and above, that was so I presume that telemedicine is going to be a very major trend that is going to come. So could you explain, you mentioned about technology also, and digital transformation, AI in healthcare, blockchain, how this technology is going to transform the patient care? Like you mentioned about the patient-centric view that we need to take.
I think that research which you shared just a little while ago about elderly patients, whether they will actually take to telemedicine. Take a look at the issue. When we also did a survey, what we observed was that for most of the chronic diseases, whether it is cardiovascular, diabetes, mental health, etc., which is afflicting the elderly population a lot more. They were all confined to home, and even the hospitals were not entertaining them because of their vulnerability, because of comorbidity, etc. So, when the telemedicine thing started slowly going up, the elderly population took to it, very quickly, because they realized that this is the way to go forward, and we cannot be, what should I call it, as hesitant with these newer technologies. They, in fact, took to that a lot more easily, which is a very good development in my view, and it is here to stay. But if you were to ask me, Sujata, whether telemedicine will be the only way forward, no. It is going to be a sort of a hybrid that will evolve. What will happen is that when a physician feels that there is a need for the physician to have the physical presence of the patient to assess his key parameters, etc., he is going to ask the patient to come to the hospital or his clinic and do those initial tests and results, etc. The subsequent follow-up visits that are there are the ones he is going to tell the patient, you know what, now the next 2, 3 follow-ups, we can do a good, nice telemedicine call, we can do telecall. And subsequently, after 6 months, when I feel if there are any changes in your parameters, I will ask you whether you must come to the clinic or we can continue the teleconsultation. This is the way it is going to evolve. In some of the difficult conditions, there is no other option but to have the physical presence of the patient. If the patient has to undergo an angioplasty, I mean, there is no other option but to go to the hospital and get it done. So there are several such type of healthcare intervention where physical presence will be extremely critical. But there are several others where, for example, dermatology. Many of the dermatological problems today, with the help of nice apps, take a photograph, send it across to the dermatologist. He is able to diagnose it and is able to prescribe a good medication. It's going to become pretty common rather. So there are going to be specializations where the penetration of telemedicine is going to be a lot more. There are going to be specializations where it's going to be probably a lot more balanced. That's my view on the telemedicine part. But it will evolve, with the type of changes that are happening both in the regulatory landscape as well. Because today, with the broad guidelines that have come in, there is a lot more confidence even amongst the doctors to take telemedicine as a way forward. Now, coming to the other question that you asked, before I go there, see, one other thing, Sujata, which I must bring it to the attention, is the collaboration part that I talked about. See, look at what happened during the pandemic. Vaccines, for example, normally they take several years for a vaccine to come into the market. But here, within about 12 months or sub 12 months, we had a vaccine available in the market. What happened? That was the power of collaboration amongst research institutes, between pharmaceutical companies. Pharma companies opened up their libraries for anyone to visit them, share their knowledge, share their expertise, and with that type of a collaboration, we could get some of these vaccines, whether it is an mRNA vaccine, from Pfizer and Moderna, and then we had the AstraZeneca vaccine that came. Look at again the power of collaboration. AstraZeneca collaborated with Serum Institute, brought the vaccines into the country, and today by far AstraZeneca vaccine, which is being manufactured by Serum Institute, is the largest vaccine that is getting being provided to the patients. Now, similarly, also look at it. Other collaborations that happened. There was this remdesivir, right? Gilead just went ahead and gave voluntary licenses to so many companies that they all got manufactured locally here and it was made available. MSD gave voluntary licenses to molnupiravir. They said, just go ahead and get the product into the market. Similarly, J&J, they partnered with BioE and their vaccine is going to be available. What I want to emphasize is that these are all some excellent learning from the pandemic. With collaboration, we were able to get the vaccines, the medicines. Eli Lilly gave voluntary licenses to baricitinib, and it was made available right across the length and breadth of the country. That's what helped, us address the issue of, COVID-19 in such a comprehensive manner. Now, coming to the question that you asked, the digital and application of AI, etc. Yes, there is a significant, application of technology, AI, machine learning, etc., that is happening, and it has rather taken a very, what should I call it, as a sudden boom in its adoption in terms of its application during this pandemic. Let me just give you a couple of examples here. Several digital health tools, were used, during this pandemic for patients receiving care at home. And one simple thing, were you even aware about a pulse oximeter earlier? Pulse oximeters were available, but now everybody knew how to use these simple tools, digital health tools to monitor their oxygen levels. Connected biometric sensors were available to the patient so that it helped the patient monitor herself or himself in a very easy manner. Similarly, there were clinical trial tools that were there which helped collect patient information through a virtual trial. So instead of a clinical trial that happens primarily in a hospital setting, it became a hybrid trial, wherein there was some part of it that was being enabled at the clinic, and the rest of it was being monitored at the patient's home itself. And this was all thanks to the connected biometric sensors and connected tools that were available. And you also know about the consumer wearables that have come in, which are able to monitor several of the parameters, whether it is the blood pressure, the heart rate. There are tools to also measure your simple things like the blood glucose monitoring, etc. And this helped much better patient monitoring than what would have otherwise happened. I did talk about the smartphones, which was used for capturing skin lesions and helped in fact patient examination even in the remotest of the places. And now if you look at it, if you see some of the homegrown examples here, the Arogya Setu app that was, which was introduced by the government, it had more than 100 million downloads in a very short span of time. People started using the Arogya Setu tool, and it's very comprehensive. We were not used to these type of technologies earlier. 1mg came in earlier as only a e-pharmacy tool, but today it is a medical store, it is a healthcare app, it is a telemedicine appointment app, it is helping in booking lab tests. So it has become a comprehensive tool today for the patient. So there has been huge amount of technology adoption during the pandemic phase, which in my opinion will help going forward in the future as well. And in fact, one of the statistics that I was looking at it, what they said was, I talked about this hybrid decentralized trials. These are expected to reduce the number of on-site visit required to the hospital by the patient, if it is in phase 2 or in phase 3 trial, by anywhere from 44 to 61%. It will thereby also help reduce the load on the hospital, without any compromise in terms of the study. That is the advantage of all these new systems that have that have probably caught the attention a lot more. They were at a different level of evolution pre-pandemic, and post-pandemic, it has all come up in a very, very big manner.
I had a different question regarding the collaboration part, but you did answer that earlier. my question on collaboration was going ahead, the innovation and a multi stakeholder collaboration among the government, the private sector, the academia, technology and healthcare startups, experts, and other stakeholders will be the way for a stronger patient centric and technology enabled healthcare system. So, how do we keep this alive once this pandemic is over? We already see there are so many collaborations, but we are like in the beginning of the pandemic, we saw a lot of collaboration. Now, how do we keep this healthy relationship going on?
In fact, Suja, this is something that we are also continuously engaging with the government stakeholders. How do we try and take this? Because, uh, as you rightly said, India is very strong in terms of reverse engineering and bringing in chemical molecules into the market. Okay, we have done a phenomenal job, and that's the reason why we are also called as a pharmacy of the world. Now it is important for us to go to the next level of becoming an innovation hub of the world. We have the type of what should I call it as the engineering capability. We have the medical talent available here. We have mathematics, which is very strong in India, mathematics and statistics, very strong in India. We have good academic institutions. We have large hospitals with extraordinary patient, loads that are there. All of them are very conducive for us to create an extraordinary innovation ecosystem in the country. But this is where we need to ensure that all the enabling, environment are put in the right manner. What do I mean by it? We must have a good, strong regulatory system which will facilitate in terms of doing clinical studies or research in a nice, quick manner in India without any compromise on safety, efficacy, or quality. I'm not talking about it. When I'm talking about is having a regulatory landscape which is very conducive to doing research. I think we have to develop that. This is number one. Number two is that we must create a wonderful, what should I call it as, an IP ecosystem, intellectual property ecosystem, because unless we monetize this research, because research is not, inexpensive. It is very expensive, right? Today, it is said that any molecule that is coming to the market, it costs close to $2 billion, by the time it hits into the market and gets commercialized. So there must be an ecosystem which will recognize the intellectual property, which will reward the intellectual property, and which will also encourage scientists to patent their innovations so that they can monetize it and thereby create value. Okay, it's only then that there is going to be a lot of energy that's going to come in the entire innovation ecosystem. We need to develop that intellectual property environment. I know we are very glad, actually, if you look at now, the Prime Minister talks about this, Innovate India from several platforms. Okay, innovation is getting into a focus. And this momentum, we must, really take it forward and also ensure that we create the enabling, ecosystem. Similarly, finance. How do we try and build in a good financing ecosystem for research and development? That is also, required. There is a lot of work ongoing as we speak, and hopefully in the coming months, we will see some good R&D policies coming out from the government that will make India also a research hub. That's what we are expecting. But unless all these ecosystems that I talked about, regulatory, IP environment, etc., are addressed, it will not really move, at the pace and in the direction in which we want to move. So those fundamentals have to be really addressed. And that is what today we are also calling it as ease of doing business. See, if you take a look at China, we always compare with China, attracts a huge amount of basic research dollars, billions of dollars. We have not been able to attract that so far. What is it that has, limited the global billions of dollars coming into India? It is the ecosystem that has to be there, which will encourage, the large corporations to come here and set up those research labs and do something. See, today in areas like IT-enabled services, okay, doing back-end research work, almost every one of our member companies has a establishment in India, employing hundreds of people over here or thousands of people here, and doing all this IT-enabled, quite sophisticated type of work is going on, but mostly into the data analytics part. But we have to move into basic research, and for which an enabling system has to be created by the government. And all this that you talked about, whether it is industry, government, academia, patient organizations, we need to all come together to see that we take our country to a different level from a research perspective.
You mentioned about Make in India. So how is this helped? And do you think India can make a splash in the world of medical devices or in the pharma and be a dominant force to reckon with when it comes if we follow the Make in India initiative? How far have we been successful in that?
Let us put it in certain buckets, Sujata. If you look at the chemistry-based molecules that are there, and slowly beginning also with a few biologics, India is quite well equipped to manufacture those products, and that is the reason why such huge amount of pharma exports are happening to the global markets, whether it is to the Europe, US, etc. Okay, there India has established its capability, particularly in the pharmaceutical space of chemistry-based products. But you look at the future, if you look at it, they are all in biologics, gene therapy, targeted therapy. These are all highly sophisticated, types of treatments that are coming in. This is where India will have to move going into the future. And if that has to happen, we need to invest in research. What I talked about a little earlier, we need to equip ourselves in terms of research. That is number one. Number two, let us assume also that we have been able to get a biologic, because the patent has expired and you are able to make it. We must also have a biologic regulations, biosimilar regulation, which is matching that of the global regulation, so that the acceptance of these biologics in the global markets also become much better. So that regulatory pathway of ensuring that we have world-class regulatory pathway must also be in place. If these things are all put in the right manner, certainly India has a huge opportunity to continue to lead as a pharmacy of the world. And I would say quality pharmacy of the world. It is very important that we just don't only call ourselves as pharmacy of the world. We must also emphasize on, we should also ensure that we are able to provide the highest quality products, both across the world and also in our country. So far as medical devices is concerned, I think we are still in very early stages. And certainly there is an opportunity. Probably it will take a little longer time than the pharma sector, because pharma sector has been a little ahead of the curve because of last 2 decades of its extraordinary experience, and knowledge that it has acquired. The medical device sector probably will take, a little more time to become somewhere a great export hub from India. I think it's going to take a longer time.
I have two more important questions for you. You mentioned about the pharmaceutical and the biopharmaceutical. So not many understand the difference between, from the chemical side of the pharmacy and the biologic kind of pharmaceutical part. We are moving towards biopharmaceuticals now. The investment required in biopharmaceuticals is much more higher than what is required for the pharmacy research. So there are only very few companies like Biocon or Synergy or Syngene who is doing research in that area. So how do we kind of, you talked about the financing ecosystem also. So how are we going to bring that together, and how will OPPI, how can OPPI help this transformation to take place?
See, it's a very good question that you're asking. And you're right, Sujata, when you say today in India, in terms of work that is being done in the biologic space, there are few companies like Biocon or Cadila, Dr. Reddy's. They are all in several stages of doing work in the space of biologics, right? But what we must understand and help attract is, if you look at all the global pharma leaders, the Pfizer's, the Novartis, Genzymes, the Sanofi's of the world, if you look at their portfolio, almost all the major chunk of the portfolio is moving in the space of biopharmaceuticals. All these targeted therapies or, gene therapy and biologics. This is what it is moving in, and they require huge amount of investment. And there are several ways that one can work on it. Let me put them into a couple of buckets. One of the easier, and if I can call it as a low-hanging fruit, is creating a good regulatory system for doing clinical studies in India. See, today, at one point in time, India attracted a lot of clinical studies being done in India, including phase 2, phase 3 studies, and so on. But the entire regulatory pathway underwent a complete, major issues. With the result, the clinical studies have literally become very small in India. And countries like, Vietnam or, our neighboring countries are seeming to attract a lot more compared to India. So what can be done? I think if you looked at all the regulatory pathways that are there to do a clinical study, they must be facilitated in a manner which is globally aligned, right? I will give you one example again here. Government of India has come out with, as part of the NDCT rules, Rule 101. Rule 101, what did it say? It said that if a product is approved in all the major Western world, like the US or Europe and advanced countries, if they are approved, then in India, we don't need to do a phase 3 clinical study. We can do a phase 4 study and give a PSUR information on the safety efficacy of the product. This rule has been, in discussion for the last more than 2 years. Only the list of countries have to be notified. If the list of countries are notified, then the regulator can also give easy approval, and these products can become available to the patients at a much earlier date than a lag that is there today. If in US it is approved 2 years back, even after 2 years, my product is not available in the country, and who is losing? It's the patient who is losing. So that's on the clinical trial front. Now, the other part, same in clinical.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I have a question there. The body type of a US person or a Vietnamese will be different from that of our countrymen.
Very,
So how do
very,
we?
very good question, Sujata, because today, most of the global studies that are happening, they are multi-centric studies, wherein they take in the global studies all ethnicities so that they are able to capture the data of, across genetic variation, ethnicity variations, etc. That is the reason why today global studies are being done, right? Where, for example, if an organization is coming out with a new biologic or any product, you do a startup doing a global, multicentric study. You recruit patients from across the globe. So you have people from Europe, you have people from India, you have people from Vietnam or Thailand, etc. So when you have a study of that kind, you are clearly covering all the needs of genetic, ethnicity variations, etc., are being addressed. And that is the other argument that we are putting in, with the regulator that, listen, when we are doing a global clinical study, which has Indian population, there is no need for again doing a phase 3 study. It is only a waste of time because you have already done a global study where Indian population is already involved in it. You're getting me? So with that data and with that safety efficacy data that is there, one must be able to register the product. And at the same time, what happens is, Sujata, the particularly our member companies, even from a global requirement, pharmacovigilance is carried out right through and through to monitor the safety and efficacy of the product. We keep on reporting on whatever, if there are any adverse events that comes in, not only it gets reported here locally, but it has to get reported even in the global database. So that's the way that you can collate the data and see what is happening. So we said that will be any which way done. That what we call it as the post-marketing monitoring will definitely be done, and that data also will be provided. So this is one. The second, which I touched upon a few seconds before, is, see, today our regulation. Yeah. So now, for example, in the phase 3 studies that are being talked about, our argument that we are putting forward to the regulators is that, see, when a global clinical study is already done in India with adequate number of patient population, there is no need to do again a phase 3 study because that has already been done as part of the global clinical study. These type of regulatory, environment must be fine-tuned, and made much more relevant to today's context. So once we have these type of enabling environment, I'm sure research will start coming back to India. First part that I talked about was the clinical study part, right? The second is trying to do research, basic research in our country itself, which is going to take probably a little longer time, but the government must give the right signals to the global pharmaceutical industry as well as the local large players by creating that enabling ecosystem that I talked about earlier, whether it is regulatory, whether it is intellectual property, whether it is financing ecosystem. And in fact, we have been in discussions with the government. If you look at the Boston model, Boston, Massachusetts model, it's a huge hub for biopharmaceutical research. How did it happen? It didn't happen overnight. It took time, but then, government of Massachusetts, they created that type of a system, where they gave that facilitation, they gave a plug and play model, they provided, other augmented facilities that are required for, patenting a product. The financing system also started developing over here. So like that, we have to slowly but steadily start that. Yeah, and in fact, we even said that it should begin at least in one or two places. Maybe you can think about Hyderabad or a Delhi or a Bangalore. Start somewhere and encourage, and over a period of maybe 5 10 years from today, we will bear the fruits of it. It's a long haul. And also learn from what other countries have done to attract these investments. Okay, what is it that we can do to attract that investment into the country? Yeah, because it is not only the investment in terms of dollars, Sujata, that will come in, but you will also get the capability, the science, the knowledge, which is invaluable. That will also come, which will help us go to the next levels.
Yeah, yeah, that's one thing which we would need. That's attracting students towards pure science who can take up research. These days, that's very less. So there are people, or there are organizations which are pushing students towards taking up pure science so that they can go into research and they can go, further the pharmaceutical or the biopharmaceutical ambitions that we have. Does OPPI has any student initiatives as such, wherein
No,
students can?
we have the following. We do have students, but before even student, what we do is, Sujata, we have our flagship research award, which is given every year. We give a scientist award of the year, a women scientist award of the year, and a young research scientist of the year. Okay, this is given every year, for basic research that is done, in our institutions, whether it is the NIPERS, the pharmacy colleges, other research institutions like the All India Institute of Medical Sciences or IITs or IISCs, etc. And there is a independent jury panel. We receive these applications, they screen them, they rate them, and then finally we give that award every year. So this is prima facie to encourage research and innovation in the country. So this is one that we already have in existence. Okay, and it has been there for a while now, and it is considered as one of the very prestigious research awards in the country, particularly in the field of pharmaceuticals and healthcare. Now, we are also contemplating, hopefully by this year, we will also institute an award for, startup in the space of innovation, healthcare innovation in startup. Because these are all young set of people doing some extraordinary work, whether it is in diagnostics, whether it is in wearables, whether it is in data analytics and what have you. And some extraordinary work is going on, whether it is in the IITs, Bombay, in Delhi, in Chennai. And we also know a lot of work happening in All India Institute of Medical Sciences, etc., and IISCs. And also, there are these startup hubs that are there in Telangana and others. There also a lot of good work is going on. We are going to announce this award very soon for recognizing these young startups working in the healthcare space, and how do we encourage them. And as part of this, while there will be in our scientist award, what we do is, Sujata, we give them a cash award of 1 lakh rupees plus a citation. The young scientist, the women scientist, and as well as the scientists, they get that. We plan to also have a monetary reward for the innovation award for the startups. We do plan with a citation, but more importantly, what we are planning is to provide mentorship support to these startups. Okay, from our member companies, if we can have leaders coming in from our members who can mentor this startup. In fact, that is going to bring in a lot of value to these folks. And over a period of time, let us see how it evolves. We could also bring in some global connects because we represent US, Europe, and Japanese organization from all around the world, literally, can we also bring in some global connect to these young innovators? This is something which is under a very strong consideration for this year. In addition to this, I did talk to you about quality, earlier on. We also plan to institute quality awards. How do we try and build in quality as a part of our DNA? It's so important, and all the more in pharmaceutical. Quality is supreme, and quality for every product. It is not only for the exported products. Products that are supplied in India must also have the highest world-class quality, because it's going to be taken by the patients. So we also, in order to create that culture of quality, we are also planning to institute a few quality awards this year, and announcements will be made very, very soon in public.
Very good initiatives. In fact, we would like to know more about this.
And also, before I forget, Sujata, we also have yet another one, which we call it as refreshing research. In fact, what I'll do is I'll request Asawari to send you a note on that refreshing research. You can take a look at it. This again is focused on young talent. How do we try and encourage them into the field of research, and also facilitating and helping them, to pursue the path of research, what we call it as refreshing research.
Okay, that would be really great. So my final question to you is future of pharma in India. I know you encapsulated all of it, but if you can give me, what would be the future of pharma in India, and what would be the role of OPPI in that?
In one word, the future of pharma is bright. It can be really made very successful if all the enabling provisions are addressed in a systematic, comprehensive manner. And I'm glad the government is engaging in conversations with the industry bodies. OPPI has been invited, and we have given several recommendations for changes in the regulatory environment, changes in the intellectual property environment, changes in the pricing environment. Okay, in the entire policy landscape, if we bring in changes, that's going to create the what should I call it as the right ecosystem for this industry to flourish, grow, and continue to be the pharmacy of the world. Now, there are two parts again. There is a huge opportunity in India per se, because India itself is a large market, and a lot can be done in India, right, by the pharmaceutical industry. That is for serving the patients in India. India, as I said earlier, has a huge capacity and capability to capture the global value as well, provided all the enabling provisions are addressed in a comprehensive manner. Okay, that is the opportunity for the next 15, 20, 25 years, where it's in biologics, gene therapy, targeted therapy, all these areas. We must start work today so that we can be there as to how we are there today with the chemistry-based products. That is what we must position ourselves to be in. And towards this, as I said earlier, OPPI has always been focusing on research-based pharmaceutical environment, because all our members are global research-based pharmaceutical company. And it is research and innovation that's going to take this industry and our country to the next level. Okay, that is what is required. So I feel it is very bright, but if we need to speed up the reforms process. We must speed up the ease of doing business process, very quickly. IP regimen has to be very quickly resolved. Some of these retrograde steps that have been taken must be addressed very quickly. What do I mean by this? We abolished IPAB board, Intellectual Property Appellate Board was abolished very recently. Without a full-fledged judicial system in place to address IP litigations, there are no specialized IP benches or IP courts across the country except Delhi. If intellectual property legal issues crop up, they need to get addressed quickly because it's a value of time. Time is value at the end of the day. If you spend a huge amount of time only fighting the battle, the patent validity is lost, right? These are the type of things which the government must look at it from a very holistic fashion, which I think they are doing as we speak. And if these, modifications and refinements are done, it's a huge opportunity for India, and we must not miss the bus. That is most important. We must not miss this opportunity, and because please let us understand, other countries are not keeping quiet. It's a very competitive environment, right? Vietnam is trying to get this one, Philippines is trying, Indonesia is trying, Europe, several countries are trying to attract, investment. So it's a very, competitive environment. And if we have to be better off, that, regulatory and policy environment has to be made very conducive to the industry.
Very true, and really very engaging conversation with you, Mr. Anandakrishnan, and I'm really glad that you could agree for this. You did agree for this interview.